Palestine Action is now a designated terrorist organization in the UK. We talked about this something about last week, I think, about that this was might be happening, and now it did happen. So we'll talk about what this means, what why it happened, the justification the government is using, as well as a lot of communists are coming in arms about the individual rights that are they wouldn't use the term individual rights, but the so-called human rights that are being suppressed by this. So yeah, that's what we'll cover today. Joining me today are Marco and Richard. Hey guys, and you guys are in the UK, so I'll go to you, Marco. I'll just bring it in that yeah. So basically, this sort of law was passed. I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday, but it was passed by sort of like sort of across the aisle support. Basically, I think about two-thirds of Labour and almost all Conservatives voted for it, as well as few sort of like smaller parties that are there. It was able to pass with, I think, relatively comfortable majority, something like 370 or something, and you only need about 326. So yeah, this did pass. We talked about it before. Marco, any opening thoughts before we go into sort of more details?
Yeah, well, yesterday was just the first vote in the House of Commons. Tonight there is a debate at the Lords, and then they're gonna vote as well. But usually it's just a formality. So the one that really matters is the Commons one, is the elected chamber, not the bunch of old fuddy-duddies in the Lords. Yeah, I mean, well, what is there to say about these guys? This things comes after the kind of thuggery that they did a few weeks ago when they caused damage for about 7 million by spraying paint into the engines of two Voyager Airbuses, which are airplanes used for refueling in air, which means that first of all, they managed to breach a very lax security in the air base where these two airplanes were held, which is itself is a problem. But also they committed a number of thuggery and destruction across public property and private property. They attacked a couple of factories as well. But here the issue is that they've been proscribed as a terrorist organization under the 2000 Terrorism Act, just because really our government right now doesn't want to be caught with the trousers down again, given that they had to do a U-turn when it came to starting a national inquiry on the rape gangs, which involved mainly people of Pakistani origin as the perpetrators. So this is not really the government doing something good because they are set out to do something good, but just effectively reacting plain to the audience, especially with the reform biting at their heels in terms of voting. So that had to be seen to be proactive and attack these people. If anything else, because of the 26 people who voted against, there were 6 Lib Dems, 6 independents, the famous 6 jihadis, voted into parliament just on the issue of Palestine, 4 Greens and 9 Labour people. Some of them are not having the whip of the Labour Party right now, but still, the Labour people, plus another funny party, which is effectively still Labour Party. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting thing to see, if anything else, because it's the Labour Party here trying to do somersaults here to be seen as fair.
Yeah. To give you the overall numbers, it was 385 voted in favour of doing this and 26 against. That was what happened in the lower chamber yesterday. The upper chamber, the peers are kind of debating it right about now, I think. In fact, they were certainly about an hour ago they were, but that's likely to be a formality, certainly on the basis of those earlier numbers. So obviously there are 650, I think, members of parliament or thereabouts. So there's always people who don't turn up or abstain or whatever. And the Scottish National Party was one party which abstained entirely from this vote on that was their party whip decision. I think that doesn't mean it's a done deal yet, though either, of course, because this is Britain and it can still all be thrown up in the air by the courts. And there is already a court case taking place on Friday. A judicial review has been granted for Friday, where they may do two things. They may have interim relief, which will be stopping it now, stopping it being prescribed now, whilst the case is heard. Or they may allow the case to go ahead, and then, of course, if the case decided that it was illegal to prescribe them, it would be undone at that point. So either way, it's not necessarily over the line. It depends what happens in the courts, which, frankly, anything could happen. Quite honestly, depends who sits on it. Depends on what arguments they make. It might be worth just saying briefly just what prescribing really means, since it's a rather unusual word to say the least. Always looks like an error, but it's proscribing, and it means they're banned. That's what it means. It means there'd be a criminal offence to belong to invite support for, to arrange meetings for, to wear the clothing or symbols of, and that includes online and in person. So it includes both a sort of formal membership and symbolic support. It'd be illegal to basically to promote them, support them, or be associated with them in any way. That's what it would actually mean. So obviously, we're very much in favour of it, and I think a lot of what Marco referred there to the £7 million worth of damage that they caused to the four people caused to the Bryce Norton RAF base, those two aircraft sitting on the tarmac, and of course. In a lot of the descriptions of this, partly by those who don't want them prescribed, they always act as if that's vandalism. They always act as if they sprayed paint on aircraft. Well, they also sprayed paint into aircraft, into the engines. Hence the need to replace and clean and thoroughly rebuild the engines. Hence the £7 million. And they also use crowbars to damage the aeroplanes. But people drop all that. So they make it look like it's somebody spraying a tag on a wall, and as if it's a quick bit of white spirit, clean it off, job done. Not the case. And people who drop all that context, their only aim is to try and minimise, normalise, lessen the danger to life that damaging an aircraft can cause for anyone who flies in it, and of course the danger trying to protect the country from a national security perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of going into, I think, why I would agree with the idea of Palestine Action being sort of banned either through this terrorism act or some. I was going into like what else could they have this proscribed it as. But if you go to sort of like their past actions, this organization, they've vandalized property, they've stormed buildings with sledgehammers in converted prison van, aggravated burglary, criminal damage, unauthorized entry, and all of that was in with the sanction of that party, of this organization. I have one video. I think it's about 3 minutes. We don't have to play the whole thing. We can play like 30 seconds, and I just have to make sure I have the right one. Okay, let's just play this because I'm not sure if that's copyrighted music and I wouldn't want to get hit. But this was from about 2 years ago when Palestine Action basically broke into, I think it was like a drone, sort of like a construction site, Israeli in the UK. Now, this video, I found it on the official account of Palestine Action, where they are bragging about it. So you have an organization that is actively promoting crime, is actively promoting, hey, we are doing this, like we are actually committing crime. We are proud of it. We do not take it back. Similar to when they went into RAF base, they posted it on their official account. They are bragging about doing so. the idea, even if you disagree that, maybe the designated it as a terrorist organization is improper, and I can ask you about what you guys think about that specifically. The fact is that this organization absolutely should have been banned or make a new law for it. The idea that you would have an organization that is actively promoting committing crime and this is about free speech is ridiculous. Marco?
Yeah, well, I mean, the legislation itself clearly defines what terrorism is, and they fall into one of the categories. They are clearly going out there promoting and committing violence in order to obtain a political change in specifically the a pro-Palestinian change. Not that the UK is doing enough to be against Palestine, but never mind. So yeah, I mean, these people are thugs. They are criminals, criminal with a terrorist intent. But the main issue is that, as usual, as good old lefties, as good old socialists, and even communists, most of them will be found in the same midst as the various communist parties here in Britain. They think that they can use force in order to impose their ideas onto everybody else. They cannot make a cogent argument in favor of their whatever ideology they have. So they go using force, trying to impose on it, which is exactly what fascists and communists like them do. So they play exactly by the book according to what they are. So you wouldn't expect anything different. But that's why it's nice to see for once the state doing the job that the state is supposed to do, i.e., upholding private property, making sure that violence is not carried out, and therefore proscribing these people for what they are. Yeah, you could argue that it's proscribing these people as terrorists is overblown, especially in the context of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, are actually not proscribed as such because it's too politically damaging for the Labour Party to do so. To be honest, the Tories haven't done that either. So, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to see more people fingered as terrorists. I'd like to see the state be a bit clearer about who the enemies are and who the friends are. But take small wins, even if it's as I mentioned earlier on, it's an accidental win rather than a planned one.
Yeah, just on Marco's point there about the IRGC not being proscribed, some of the reasons given for that is that it would damage it would have diplomatic ramifications with the UK's dealing with Iran. As if that's a reason not to ban them, and that they don't like to ban organs of government states that are military and political entities of another country, even if they're a country like Iran, which is frankly again utterly ridiculous. Although they do like to add them to a list, like a sex offenders list, I guess. The FIRS, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. So I think they might have put them on that list. As if so that's in a drawer somewhere, which is very handy. I think one of the things I looked at when it came to the RAF Bryce Norton stuff and what they did on that base, one of the things I wanted to understand was to get a broad understanding of the difference between like vandalism and sabotage, because those are two very different things. And frankly, even a broad understanding of the two of them, even understanding what the word vandalism means legally, was enough to piss me off, quite honestly, because there's so much of the description of it seemed to justify it half at the same time when we're talking about criminal damage to property here. And of course, obviously, as people in defending individual rights and the rights to your property, we're obviously against that. But talking about damage in terms of personal, social, or expressive damage, that it may be impulsive, expressive, or targeted. So that's criminal damage. That's vandalism. But when it comes to sabotage, that's conduct resulting in damage to an asset, specifically for a purpose prejudicial to the safety interests of the UK. Now, I think planes that are designed to refuel planes when we're fighting any enemy, and those planes not being available to supply that fuel, would be prejudicial to the safety interests of the UK. So, I mean, it's clearly far more than vandalism, even of the expressive kind, if you entertain such a ludicrous notion. One thing worth mentioning is at the same time as prescribing this organization, they always have to balance it out by mentioning a couple of others. So they threw in a couple of others at the same time, who frankly I've never heard of. They're on the other side of the spectrum. They're the Maniacs Murder Cult, but perhaps clues in the name maybe, but never heard of them. And the Russian Imperial Movement. Now I'm sure they had every right to ban those two as well. But that's just, they can't just ban Palestine Action in one go and make it clear. They must throw something else into it as well.
Now, somebody in the chat was asking for the definition of terrorism. So the Terrorism Act of 2000 defines it as the act of terrorism as the use or threat that is designed to influence the government or an international governmental organization, or to intimidate the public or a section of the public. And the use and threat is made for the purpose of advancing political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. So I think what Palestine Action is doing is absolutely this. The goal is to, I assume, stop any involvement of the UK in I mean, it's hard to even say because UK is not involved in Gaza war directly. There, I think when it comes to that RAF base, apparently that plane was used for some imaging in Gaza. I'm not even sure if that was specifically to sort of help Israel or if it was UK doing its own thing. But even if you take that, the fact is that the war in Gaza is just. There is nothing you can take away from it. UK, I think they were UK citizens taken on October 7th. So United Kingdom should have absolutely be involved, and it would be absolutely a just involvement. Somebody was also saying that this is just civil disobedience from Palestine Action. So just again, civil disobedience is you are disobeying an unjust law. What unjust law is Palestine Action disobeying? Property rights? I mean, according to them, probably property rights are theft, since they are a bunch of communists. But this is not what civil disobedience is. It's you break the unjust law, and specifically that unjust law. Not I don't like what I don't like this law, so I'm gonna go steal from my neighbor because I don't like a law being unjustly applied somewhere else. It's you go after that specifically. And even then, civil disobedience is still a crime. So you still will get punished for it, and you should take the consequences of that. I wanted to go to one article, but before we go on, Marco, anything to add?
Yeah, we should probably mention that the four people responsible for breaking into the air base have been actually charged, I think, yesterday. And they are the ages range between 22, the youngest one, and 35, the oldest one. And it's a sad endowment that two of them were jeepers. I mean, people we know define about, probably because these kind of groups, kind of people actually they use a kind of guerrilla technique. By not having a fixed address, they are less likely to be picked up by the police. So don't feel sorry for them. These are thugs. These are terrorists that actually organize this kind of events, use this kind of violence, not for disobeying purposes, but to cause damage, to hit where the government hurts in order to push through whatever policies they want to push through. So that's I'm looking forward to see these four people banged up in jail for quite a while. Soon they're gonna chant something about the IDF, I suppose, with the other friends, hopefully.
I think when it comes to civil disobedience, obviously lots of frankly hideous organizations or annoying organizations anywhere on that scale have caused all sorts of civil disobedience in the UK in recent years, like Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion. They haven't been prescribed as terrorist organizations, despite the fact that they are definitely in the wrong in terms of what they do to damage property or to intercept people's right to go about their business and that kind of stuff. But to imply that Britain is clamping down on protest, yeah, doesn't even account for the activities that they've been performing. I think the government said that it was in the case of Palestine Action is because they were aggressive because of their quote aggressive and intimidatory attacks against businesses, institutions, and the public. And including like that aggravated burglary charge, for example, and breaking in with sledgehammers and smashing up every piece of equipment they could possibly get their hands on, in fact, in private factories, as well as this incident on this RAF base. I mean, all of that makes them a very different category. And of course, it's only those who agree with their motives that they claim to have, who are defending them and saying they shouldn't be prescribed. It's nothing to do with people defending civil liberties or the right to protest. It's to do with their tribalist support for, let's call it Palestine for the sake of their argument. Not that I agree with it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think Home Secretary said Palestine Action's repeated acts of criminal damage, sabotage, and targeted intimidation are designed to undermine UK national security and disrupt our democratic process. These groups' activities are not peaceful protests, but calculated acts of terrorism. And I think later somebody else said the sabotage of military aircraft was assessed as posing a significant threat to national security. And yeah, absolutely. If you are talking about millions of pounds in repairs, there is nothing to scoff at, especially from a group that says we'll do it again. This is not just individual act. Now, I wanted to go to one article and read it. So this one is actually from the Morning Star, which, if I remember correctly from Hacker, it's read by the people who think this country ought to be run by another country. So take it. I believe it's like a communist newspaper, but it had some interesting things that I think we can point out. So this is more of I think like a edited a transcript from Zara Sultana. She had a speech, and there is this article which is slightly edited. So let's read. This week, MPs shamefully approved the proscription of Palestine Action. Several challenged the move in the Commons. Zara Sultana, independent MP for Coventry South, gave an outstanding speech in condemnation. Because of the exceptional gravity of this issue, we reproduce her speech, lightly edited here. She starts, 21 years ago, a human rights barrister defended an activist who broke into RAF Wayford trying to disable a bomber to prevent war crimes in Iraq. That became a landmark case in lawful, non-violent direct action against an illegal war. That barrister is now Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He argued that it was not terrorism, but conscience. So I don't know much about this specific case. But again, I would argue, I mean, I don't know how much I want to sort of like defend Iraq war, but every act of sort of like vandalism or sabotage towards government, I think should absolutely be punished. I'm not sure if I want to fight on that, but Marco, any thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, that was an individual. It wasn't an organized group like what are they called? Action for Palestine, Palestine Action, whatever they're called. And so you can't really proscribe an individual. The issue that damage is damage. So you could argue, well, whoever causes damage is a criminal. Yes, they are criminals. But the point here that this kind of activity has been going on for a while, and it goes on with a purpose, and it's clearly fall within the legislation. You can't argue any other thing. You can't argue, oh well, they did it because they really believe it. Well, if you're a group organized with a website, with targets, with even documentation on how to commit your crimes, how to evade them, how to prepare, how to leave the scene. You're clearly an organized crime syndicate, really. Yeah, as far as our current prime minister defending these kind of people, well, he's doing the same kind of damage to the rest of the country. So, what do you expect?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that Zara Sultana said, this Coventry Independent MP, was that, is a short quote, but it was unprecedented and dangerous overreach of the state to protect, end of quote. I'll add my bit to protect, UK residents from having aircraft that can't leave the airfield. Uh, frankly, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And people have been defending this as being non-violent and grassroots based. And I love their identification of what non-violent is seems to utterly morph and twist depending on who's committing the action. Because anyone slightly to the right of a communist is called violent based on the words they utter. But anyone who is a communist or is acting like a communist and is actually being violent, that's not violence. That's non-violent. That's just grassroots. That's just the people expressing themselves. So yeah, it's and of course the fact that people have been endlessly citing the suffragettes and the anti-apartheid movement as two examples of criminal activity that was done to promote a cause which ultimately was changed in law, which people agree with, which were things that we would agree with, the right for women to vote, and obviously being against apartheid. All of those things are used, but of course all of the context is dropped, and they're used as if that any violence for any purpose is justified. And it wasn't, you could certainly argue that the case for women voting, for example, all right, history shows what actually happened, but I'm sure that women would have got the vote anyway over time without the violent protests. And that include when I say violent protests, includes things like creating bombs for people's mailboxes, trying to bomb Westminster Abbey, for example, and of course, not just leaping out in front of the King's horse, but those kind of things. But people use the fact that those are on the right side of what laws should have become to justify the way in which they want to change any law they choose now, i.e., they want a blanket justification for any violence based on their whim, based on what they think their laws should be for all of us.
We have a super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much. A super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much. One more super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much. Super chat from Garbled Words. He's asking, or he's saying, love you to investigate Albanese lawyer claim. So Francesca Albanese is the special rapporteur for the, I always forget the full title, occupied Palestinian territories or something like that. And yeah, I think I've seen that apparently she's not actually a lawyer, that she doesn't have any qualification for that, that she only feels like she's an expert on international law. So yeah, maybe next time we talk about Francesca Albanese, we can bring that up. But yeah, I've seen that going around. We have one more super chat. Yep.
Sorry, I would like to mention Francesca Albanese actually is saying that there is a genocide going on, and because she's the one that pushes international law so strongly, well, she goes against international law because international law hasn't made up its mind yet about the genocide. So she's actually lying through her teeth. And by doing that, she negates the very made-up discipline that she thinks she's an expert about. So, poor woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there is a court that is supposed to decide this. It didn't yet. Yet she is very confident about it. We also have one more super chat from Garbled Words. He says, how do you reconcile smart British celebrities like Tilda Swinton and Steve Coogan being against proscribing? Is this champagne socialism 2025? So I don't know these guys, so yeah,
Yep, it
Richard.
is, and it's the literati and actor class who get work from the people like the BBC who hire based on you being a left wing, favouring the left, let's say, and therefore, if you want work, you favour the left and you make these kind of statements, and therefore you get acting gigs. That tends to be how it works. But absolutely, it's virtue signaling in the same way that you see some Hollywood, people sign things and protest at the Oscars or whatever. It's the same category, to be honest. But we have a particular breed within the UK of they tend to be. I'm making a generalisation here, but they tend to be upper class, well off, acting. Dynasties in many cases, and yet they hate Britain and everything it stands for, and yet they also want to be paid by it repeatedly or through taxation.
Let's continue with the article. You actually brought up a quote from here, but there is a quote right after it, which is much better. I'm not sure if you have that, but continuing. Fast forward to June 20th, 2025. Two Palestine Action activists entered RAF Bryce Norton and sprayed red paint, not fire, on aircraft linked to surveillance flights over Gaza. Instead of prosecuting them for criminal damage, the Home Secretary is using the Terrorism Act 2000 to proscribe Palestine Action as a terrorist group. This is unprecedented and dangerous overreach of the state. Never before in Britain has it been a crime to simply support a group. So there's so many lies in here. So it wasn't just red paint that was just there. They damaged actually the plane. The people who did it are still being prosecuted as far as I'm concerned, but the fact is this happened so many times that the group itself is being targeted, and never before has it been a crime to simply support the group. That's also not true. Even under Terrorism Act, if you are part of that group or even if you support that group, I think Richard, you mentioned it earlier, you went through the list. It absolutely has been a crime to support a group. So yeah, Marco, any comments on this?
Well, I mean, she says they entered the base. It's like, the door was open, so we went in, we had a ticket to pay for it. Well, bull. They made their way through by cutting through the fences. And to be honest, in a serious place, on a high security base like that, they should have received a bullet in the head by the guards in the first place. They should never be been allowed to make their way to the middle of the runway where the planes were parked and do the damage that they cause. And anyway, talking about spraying is ignoring the fact that spraying damaged the airplanes. Are they saying they got so much contempt for the airmen and women of this country who fly those planes? Because if it's just sprayed in the engine, might well cause a failure. And what about those lives? Do they care not? Clearly. This MP woman, I mean, she's just a deluded cow, really. She's just lying to the thieves by ignoring all the instances of criminality linked to this fact and just minimizing everything, like the breaking and entry and all this kind of stuff. It's just laughable.
And always that paint on, not that paint in to the aircraft engines, as if it's literally on the outside, like I mentioned before. And as you said, Daniel, I mean, even within this, even in this same debate, they prescribed two other organisations, like the Maniacs murder cult. For what is Zara Sultana arguing that the Maniacs murder cult should also not be prescribed because no groups have ever been prescribed? Is that her argument? I mean, I don't know what they've done. I was frankly reluctant to Google them for my own criminal record.
Yeah, we can continue a bit further. Palestine's action's real crime is shutting down Elbit system sites that arm the Israeli military. Its true offense is being audacious enough to expose the blood-soaked ties between this government and the genocidal Israeli apartheid state and its war machine. Let us be clear, to equate a spray can of paint with suicide bomb is not just absurd, it is grotesque. It is deliberate distortion of the law to chill dissent, criminalize solidarity, and suppress the truth. Amnesty International, Liberty, over 266 senior lawyers and UN special rapporteurs, I'm wondering who that is, have all opposed these draconian measures. Under this order, anyone expressing moral support for a proscribed group could face 14 years in prison. That includes wearing a badge, wearing t-shirt, sharing a post, or calling for the proscription. So again, Yes, and absolutely this should happen. Again, this group is committing crime, is actively going out there and committing crime. I have no idea what is the end game here. So they can just do whatever. That group can call for assassination of prime minister and that's going to be okay apparently to them, because where is the line? At what point will this group calling for violence, will this group calling for destruction of both individual property as well as government property, at, at what point can we like say, okay, these guys, they just want to commit violence, and that's probably not feel fit for a civil society. Marco?
Well, I mean, it's the same old story, isn't it? You use your action to justify your ideas. Your ideas are rotten, and your actions are even worse. Because of course, actions come from your ideas. It's your mind that informs your body on what to do. So these people try and ignore the fact that violence has been committed, and not just violence, but violence directed with the intention of changing a policy, i.e., fitting perfectly under the Terrorism Act definition. And by doing this, by effectively trying and provide a cover to these soon-to-be terrorist people, they commit the same crime. Effectively, they aid terrorists for committing the terrorism actions. So honestly, there is no way you could claim what they've done was acceptable. No one in the right mind would accept this kind of behavior as acceptable protest. But these people twist reality. They're used to it. Again, they think that they can impose force and change an argument, change somebody's mind. Well, it's their mistake, isn't it?
And don't let anyone pull the wool over your eyes when it comes to the law in the UK, and when sentence lengths are mentioned, that is the maximum sentence length. So it's up to 14 years in prison. It's just been raised from up to 10 years in prison. It doesn't mean if you were wearing a badge, even of one of these proscribed terrorist organizations, you'd be banged up for 14 years. You absolutely, you almost certainly wouldn't. Yeah, you would. And in fact, it's highly probable you might not even go to prison. Quite honestly, although you might have a criminal record off the end of it. I think but nevertheless, that's one of the fudges they try and use when they're arguing that it should be a free for all, complete free for all. And one of the things that I was reading about was one of the peers, Peter Hain, who was speaking in the House of Lords, the upper house, in the debate. Now, he was somebody who argued against apartheid in South Africa many years ago, and involved in some disruptive activity. But he was talking about disrupting rugby and cricket matches, and making a comparison with those, as if that's the same as destroying aircraft that are going to be used for helping to defend the UK from a foreign attack. Again, it's a question of dropping the context all the time. He said that he talked about the suffragette movement again, like they all refer to. And of course, the suffragette movement is endlessly taught in schools, not on the principle of equality and votes for women, but on the principle of violent action brings about change. That's what kids are really being implicitly taught, is that what you want to happen ought to happen by force. And if you think it's right, it's right. That's the argument that's used. But he talked about violence against property in a strategic manner being acceptable. Violence against property used in a strategic manner. It's just another way of saying doing what you want and saying it's strategic, and it's also violence as well. But in other contexts, you claim it's not violence. But yeah, it's all a horrible mess, quite frankly. And when you look at some of these different MPs and different groups who voted against it, it included the previous leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas. What a surprise! It always includes at least one Green, doesn't it? It includes some. I mentioned the SNP, the Scottish National Party. They abstained, but it included some Plaid Cymru people, the Welsh nationalists. Um, and of course, it includes people like Jeremy Corbyn, doesn't it? You know, the age-old people, you know, campaigning for anyone who's anti-Britain, anti-West, anti-civilization. He described this move as being absurd and authoritarian, coming from the communist.
Uh, Stedman in the chat says, smash that like button for Ayn Rand Center UK. Absolutely do so and share this so people can know about it. Also, before we move on, let me remind people that in case you are interested on how can we determine what truly exists, why is there something rather than nothing, or what is the purpose of consciousness, you can check out the new book from Zoltan Sendes, The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. Link to that is in the chat right now, and it's going to be in the description as well. As of right now, it's still on sale on Kindle, so you can get it for a really good price, and you can also get paperback or hard copy. And so yeah, make sure to follow the link and you can find out more about. It's an interesting book. We also had if you are a YouTube member, we had I think like a 20-minute conversation with Zoltan that you can check out on this channel if you just want to learn a little bit more before buying the book. And also Ayn Rand Center UK's newsletter. We have many different events. We just had one in Boston live on stage. The video of that is still on the channel. So if you want to know about when these things are happening, you should sign up for our newsletter. Follow the link in the chat and in the description. Now, yeah, let's continue with the article a little bit more. There was one thing I want to comment on here. So continuing with the article. And journalists have no exception either. There is no legal protection for reporting favorably, even factually, about Palestine Action. Let us not forget what is happening in Gaza, where the real crimes are being ignored. Hospitals bombed, children starved, and tens of thousands of people killed. Palestinian children now suffer more amputations per capita than children anywhere else on earth. And I think this is also really interesting. Well, one, she's of course lying about starvation. She, of course, omitting a lot of information when it comes to hospitals getting bombed, or the idea that tens of thousands of people are being killed. The fact is, this is a war. And even using the fact that Palestinian children now suffer more amputations per capita than children anywhere else on earth. Now, I'm not sure if this claim is true, but I've seen that thrown around, and I've seen also an interesting refutation to that. The fact, do you know what usually happens in war zone with children? They die. They do not get to survive. They do not get to get amputation. It's only when Israel really cares about the other side. It's only when Israel cares about the Palestinian children more than Palestinians themselves is the fact that amputations are happening, because that means there is still some humanitarian aid on place. It means that people who get hurt can go somewhere and be protected and actually survive another day. That's why the deaths are so low. Now, I don't think Israel should do so. I don't think Israel should care so much for the other side. It should simply finish the war as soon as possible. But it's interesting to use, again, a positive fact that Israel is doing, at least by the sort of conventional morality, and that is being used against Israel. Marco, any comments on this?
Well, yeah, again, we should remind people that the Gazan children, unfortunately, are dying because their parents, because their guardians, have chosen to attack Israel and to start a war. They've chosen to start a war, which now is resulting in Israel fighting back and defending itself. So every death, every amputation, every bit of blood spilled is on the hands of the Palestinian who started a war in the first place. But look at the way this woman talks. The real crime, apart from the painfully platonic way of looking at things, real crime, like the crime that her friends in the Palestinian Action are committing, are not real crime. The real crime are the crimes that she doesn't like. And again, the attack of hospitals is because Mrs. Gazans choose to hide the Hamas people, the casual weapons, in civilians' infrastructure. So if the Israeli hit the civilian infrastructure, is always to kill either a terrorist or to get rid of some weapons or equipment which is used to wage war against them. So this kind of it's tiring now how many times and how much these people ignore the events, ignore the facts, just extract the bits of information they're interested in and wave it around like a flag, ignoring totally what's actually happened on the ground. You just talk about bleeding babies. You never explain why the baby is bleeding, who caused it, and ultimately, it's just the rely on the fact that our benevolent view of life will make us square when you see a bleeding child. Um, but they rely on us just stopping on the first reaction, on the reaction of the feeling. But actually, if you think about it, when you analyze the situation, you move beyond the initial emotional response, you understand what goes on behind it. But again, we're talking about a bunch of savages who celebrate death at every turn. So, do you expect them to be rational as well? Of course not.
And of course, ultimately, to stop any babies bleeding, what do you need? You need freedom. You need capitalism. You need people to be able to be in charge of their own lives. You don't need them to be subject to theocracies, to mysticism, to all of the things which drive the ideology that brings Hamas into existence, keeps it in existence, and causes everything that happened and is continuing to happen in Gaza. I think you only need to look at some of the reasons, like that judicial case I mentioned that's going through on Friday, starting on Friday. Some of the reasons they cite in there sound like they could have been, extracted from this article you're reading out from this communist newspaper. Quite honestly, they talk about it being a breach of human rights, the Human Rights Act, to prescribe Palestine Action as a terrorist organization. They talk about discrimination. Discrimination against what? Terrorists. They talk about error of law and the failure to consider relevant factors. Well, they're specialists in the failure to consider relevant factors, aren't they? Such as you spoke about, what those hospitals and schools really are, contain, conceal, and are used to protect, and the way in which they are only they're only hit when the IDF is trying very hard to avoid any civilian casualties and to go specifically for the terrorists using them as cover.
Now, continuing a little bit more with the article, it says Israel is on trial for genocide at the International Court of Justice, and the Israeli Prime Minister faces an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Yet the government's response is to criminalize solidarity and to continue exporting lethal F-35s, F-35 jets that are decimating Gaza. We also have to understand the history of this country and what built our democracy, the tradition of civil disobedience that includes the suffragettes, without whom I would not have the vote, let alone the privilege of being here as an MP. Even those who oppose Palestine Action's tactics must recognize the vast gulf between criminal damage and terrorism. If this order passes, what and who is next? Climate protesters, striking workers, feminists in the street. So again, this is not ban on pro-Palestinian rhetoric or pro-Palestinian action. This is a specific group that has been advocating for violence that is now banned. That's all this is. And yeah, I would agree if there is, organization like Just Stop Oil that is actively sending out people to vandalize and also damage property and block streets. At some point, I would agree with banning them as well. Maybe again, doesn't have to be terrorism. UK has legislation to describe them as something else. Marco?
Yeah. Do you know what else is against international law? Invading a country, killing over 1,000 people and taking 250 hostages. And it's very much against international law to still hold the hostages over 600 days after. But these people never focus on that. They always look at their tribe's criminal act and try to justify them. This woman is particularly stupid, I'm sorry to say, because yes, right, she's got a right to vote thanks to the suffragettes movement, but she's also pushing for Islamic action, for the Islamic monsters that rule Gaza, the people of Hamas. So how many women actually vote in Gaza? How many people How many women are on the Hamas political party? How many women have got right to actually live freely in the Middle East or in the Islamic dictatorship and shitholes that she's trying to protect and foster and implement here in Britain? Actually, she's got a right to vote because we are civilized. Through the centuries, we learned that individual freedom is actually what allows human life to thrive, what allows you to be free and achieve a level of prosperity that is unachievable in any other ways. But no, she talks again about suffragettes, ignoring again the fact that the action against an oppressive regime, an oppressive state, is more or less justified. What you cannot do, move from a relatively free government that we have, and trying to push it back towards a medieval theocracy, what these people are actually trying to do. So that's wrong in many levels because you're not moving towards more individual freedom, you're moving away from it. And that's clearly morally wrong, but also criminal.
And look at some of the wording in that article. Lethal F-35 jets. Yeah, the whole point of F-35 jets is that they're lethal. And the whole point of this argument is that they would like to have no jets whatsoever because they like everybody to be under the yoke of communism, some one world humanity that oppresses the individual. And therefore doesn't require any jets at all. But no individual is free either, and is subject to whatever violence the state chooses to exert upon them. And of course, that they're also against nuclear as well, and yet of course they're also defenders of Iran at every stage of the game, even when they're trying to create nuclear weapons and enrich uranium. And of course, we've seen videos even today, I think, or at least ahead of the vote in Parliament yesterday, of people from Palestine Action chanting "Death to the IDF" in the same way that they did at the stage of Glastonbury, as it's been normalised by BBC coverage of such a chant, and as it's slipped into people's minds and memories because of the way it rhymes. Or the way it intonates. So it's hideous the direction that we're going in, even whilst the government is pushing back here and prescribing this as a terrorist organization, because that is one aspect of it. But the effect on the culture and the effect on people repeating the kind of stuff that's said in different forms relentlessly is sadly still works. And that's what we need to challenge in all of our conversations, whether they're private or in this kind of forum, wherever people are stating these things, like these false accusations of genocide, false accusations of apartheid. They need to be challenged, not brushed aside as if they were valid arguments. Because there's no way you can argue that this is like the suffragettes, like apartheid in South Africa, or like any of the hideous wars that they choose to cite as comparisons. Just unfair comparisons, but of course they're really ready to make unfair comparisons to engage in whataboutism rather than looking at the actual essentials that allow you to draw out proper principles and understand what's good and what's evil, and therefore to apply the principle across time, across nations, across situations.
Absolutely. And with that, let me remind people again, The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy, a book that just came out. You can get it on Amazon right now. If you are buying it on Kindle, you get a great discount. I think it's pretty much about $1 or €1. So use the link in the chat or in the description, and you can find out more about the book. Marco, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, if you weren't that these people are here in Britain, they probably will manage to get away with some slap on the wrist, really. Of course, from tonight, if the Lords vote in favor and the cases, the tribunal cases that Richard pointed out earlier on, challenging this move, go through, well, anyone found to support or be part of this organization will probably receive up to 14 years in jail, which again is not enough because I wonder how much you get if you try to be a Nazi nowadays. But it's just a matter of we have laws against terrorism, we have laws against violence, we have laws against crime. It's just a matter of making sure the laws that we have are implemented, and you don't need to give more power to the state as such. We have laws, we have morality, and we should really be able to stamp out this kind of activity just by making the point that violence is never acceptable if it's initiated. You can never force your way as a replacement to an argument. Bad ideas can be fought with better ones, but violence never has a place. And we should fight anyone who wants to impose their will by force. Force is only legitimate against somebody who initiates force with the intention of removing the threat in itself. And we've seen how wrong it goes in Israel, for example, when you don't set out to remove the threat that causes that threatens your existence. So,
Yeah, and I'll just add as my final thoughts that it did receive cross-party support, but of course, all of those who are against it are one end of the spectrum, quite definitely one end of the spectrum, despite being from a different range of parties. And of course, even though like all the Conservatives voted for it and Reform will almost certainly haven't checked, but will have voted for it as well. That doesn't mean that they are operating from the perfect positions either, from the best positions either, including the fact that the IRGC wasn't proscribed as a terrorist as terrorists, and that you've kept these diplomatic channels open to dictatorships, and that you've had all these conversations and continue to via all sorts of means, including via the EU in your dealings with them. You're still funding Russia's war effort at the same time. So there's plenty that's been wrong under all governments because of a lack of understanding of the principles of individual rights. And of course, once that is gone, everything else is different shades of the wrong conclusions to different extents. But this is a particularly good to see that they're prescribing as a terrorist organization, but that in its own is not enough. We're still heading down the wrong track so long as people cheer for them in all sorts of different ways, as they are sadly doing even at music festivals. So, and in terms of where people can find some of our stuff, you can always check out the Briefly Objective link below for short form material. You can find lots of videos we made all about the essential principles, including in this conflict of since October the 7th.
And with that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective. Until then, bye bye.